Well, thank you guys so much for being here today. My name is Kat Polsinelli, and I can't thank you guys enough for being here today and being a part of this event and this amazing organization. And I'd like to thank Erica and the organization as a whole for what they are doing in this community. You see, I used their services 10 years ago to this month. And so I'm here today to share with you not only my story, but to also share with you about how you can move through things that you've been through and you can make it to the other side, and how we still have a choice to choose where it is that we want to go. I'd like to start with a couple of questions, so I'd love to get you guys' help. I would like for you to raise your hand in just a moment. So I have a question for you. I know that all of us have heard about domestic violence and sexual assault. We've heard the word abuse. And so I want you to hold on to the word abuse for me. And I want you to think on that word. And I want you to think about what abuse means to you. My question to you is, and I'd like for you to raise your hand, when you think of the word abuse, how many of you immediately go to physical violence? Show of hands. Awesome, thank you so much. Now for the rest of you, and for any others, when you think of the word abuse, do you think that it could potentially be emotional, psychological, sexual, and or physical abuse? Raise your hands. Thank you so much. I ask you this question because you see, in our society and even in our judicial system, physical and sexual abuse are very easy to understand. They're very easy to see, right? Because we can see the scars. We can see the physicalities of that. But the issue with that is emotional and psychological abuse, those scars aren't seen. And for a lot of people, they are holding on to them for decades, and nobody realizes that they have seen that. Statistics show from the CDC and the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence that 1 in 4 women, and 1 in 7 men have experienced domestic abuse. And 1 in 3 women, 1 in 6 men have experienced sexual assault. And that is from April of 2023. So to put that into perspective, if you look around at your table, look at the 3rd to 4th woman to your left or to your right. That is someone that could have been in that situation. Look to the 7th or 6th man to your left or your right. That is someone that could have been in that situation. And this is the reason why I share my story. I share my story because I spent 10 years in an abusive relationship. And it took me 2.5 before I made the final decision to get out. And unfortunately for most, that is such a hard decision to make. So my hope here is today is that you gain an understanding of not only what it is that I have been through and what others have been through, but how you may potentially be able to help someone make that difficult decision when the time comes. What I'd like to do though is I'd like to take you guys back just a little bit. And I'd like to give you a little bit of my background so that you can understand where it is that I come from and understand how the choices that I made changed the trajectory of how my life went. So we're gonna go back to when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, I was very ambitious, I was very outgoing, sometimes a little outspoken, but I was always the one to stand up for others. And that is who I am at my absolute core. I was raised in this community. I actually went to Las Casas when it was K through 8th. And I went to Oakland. I was a part of their softball and their track team, and I was also a member of choir. I had dreams, goals, and ambitions as a teenager. Big ones, as we all do. But at the age of 16, I decided to do what everybody else was doing, get a boyfriend. In getting that boyfriend, I ended up pregnant at the age of 16. My dreams, goals, and ambitions were crushed. My family was devastated. And I had a wonderful upbringing. I'm the oldest of 3 girls. My family is still together. My parents have been married for 40 plus years. I had a wonderful upbringing, but this was something that none of us saw coming. It's the first time in my life that I truly felt like I had completely and utterly disappointed and let down my entire family. So I had a choice to make. And that choice was either I decided to be a teenager and let go of my son, or I decided to step into being a mother. I chose to be a mom. I left all my dreams, goals, and ambitions behind, all of my friends. I found an alternative school that I could take my son with me. I graduated my junior year with honors, second in my class, and president of student council. I was determined to make it right. I was determined to prove that I could fix what I had messed up. At the end of my high school year, I went one direction and my son's father went another. So I did what everybody said you were supposed to do. I got a job and I went to college. I worked a full-time job during the day at a daycare center where I could take my son with me, and I went to college at night. Now this time, I'm feeling really good about myself, right? I've kind of gotten through some things. I've made it further than what a lot of people have, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Unfortunately, during that, I forgot that I was still a teenager, and teenagers make irrational decisions. My family and I ended up butting heads, and at the age of 18, I moved out. Shortly after moving out, I met another boy. But this one was different. Oh, he was so different. You see, he got to do what he wanted to do. He told his family no, and he still got his way. Mind-blowing, right? Something I'd never seen before. And so because of that, I was magnetized to that situation. Quickly after getting into that relationship, I started having more arguments with my family. He started having issues with them. And so began the trickle of isolation and control, something I wasn't aware of at the time. At the age of 19, I had my second son, and the control had started to pick up. Again, I didn't realize it because I had never seen it. It was so bad that my family wasn't even allowed to come to the hospital to see my son when he was born. But I was to support him. That was my job. You see, abuse comes in many forms. And abuse at its core means to cause duress or harm. If we break it down even further, it is anything that is meant to manipulate, to terrorize, to intimidate, or to frighten someone. And in all of that lies control. During this relationship, I became the person that did everything. I held 2 to 3 jobs the entire time I was in this situation. He could never work. There was always a reason or an excuse. I was a mother of 2 children. I was required to cook 7 days a week, do the laundry, clean the house, anything you could think of. And most importantly, make sure he was happy. Now, I know we've all been in these situations where, you work really hard throughout the day, you haven't had a lot of sleep, and you're just exhausted. You're just tired. I didn't even have the ability to be able to sleep if he decided that I shouldn't. But here's the interesting part. Yes, there was some physicalities in my relationship, but for me, the majority of it was emotional and psychological. So it wasn't like I got beat when I wanted to go to bed. No, it was the mind games, the crying, the you don't love me, the you don't appreciate me, look what I do for you. The things that really tug at our heartstrings, that make us want to do for another person. There is that control again. There is that manipulation. I can't tell you how many times in my situation that I began to start taking responsibility for things that weren't mine. You see, what's interesting about psychological and emotional abuse is it happens in a cycle, and then it happens on repeat. And so, generally, when you're rational, you can think about whether or not you agree with someone. You can recall situations and you can state your facts. But I can guarantee you and I can promise you that when you have someone daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly tell you different, you begin to question yourself. Maybe I am responsible. Maybe I didn't remember that right. Maybe I am the bad person. And so that is one of the reasons why I stayed. This is one of the reasons why I bring up that it is so important that we talk about this topic that is so taboo in our community. Because there are so many people that are going through these situations. And the longer that we allow them to be in the shadows so that we can remain in our comfort, the longer it continues to go on. Our growth doesn't happen when we're comfortable. Our growth happens when we are put in an uncomfortable situation. And I believe that that needs to happen in order to start bringing this to the surface and bringing it to light so that other people understand what is going on. Again, physical and sexual abuse have scars. You can see them. Emotional and psychological don't. And while I gave you those statistics earlier, I can guarantee you there are even more that have not come forward, that aren't even aware of what they have been through, or honestly, didn't make it out of the situation. Through my relationship, I told you that it took me 2.5 years to get out of it. I'll tell you the defining moment for me. Those 2 years before I got out. We were having an argument like we normally did, and I would do what I always did. I would shut my kids' door to keep them in their room, and we would go at it. This time my kids came out, and at that time they were probably about 5 and 7. I can't tell you what we were arguing about, but what I can tell you is this. In the middle of our argument, I hear my children say to me, "Yeah, Mom, it's your fault. Why are you so mean? Why can't you just be nice to Daddy?" That was the catalyst in changing my life. That is when I realized that no matter what happened to me, I was strong, I could handle it. But to allow my children to grow up to be like him, no way. But it took me 2.5 years. During those last 2.5 years, I managed to get a really good job. I worked in a medical facility. I started doing therapy on patients. I made sure to put a mask on so that nobody knew what was going on. We're really good at that. And I'd love to tell you that during this situation, those last 2.5 years, I made the decision. I put my foot down and I decided to get out, but that's not what happened. What's interesting about this is, so I actually had a patient that used to come in very regularly, usually in the evenings. And we would always chat, and I found out that he was actually getting his law degree. And so I would ask questions here and there just to kind of poke around. But this one morning in particular, after I dropped my children off from school, my abuser and I got into a fight. This is the first time in a really long time that he put immediate bruises on me. I had bruises on my back, on my arm, and my lip was busted. I gathered myself. He drove me to work. I went to the bathroom, wiped off my face, and I went to the office. What's interesting about that day is that same patient that usually came in the evenings happened to come in the morning. And I remember doing therapy with him, and I just kind of started asking questions. Didn't want to give away too much information. But what I can tell you is, I do not remember the conversation, but I do remember this. When I got done talking with this gentleman, he said, "You have two choices. You either call the police, or I call them for you. I work in the domestic violence center." That was my saving grace. That is what helped me make the decision to leave. And you may be thinking, great, right? You should be happy you're moving on the other side. No, because you see, along with the emotional and the psychological abuse, also comes survival mode. There is no logical thinking. I had to tell my employer now. I had to tell the police officer. I had the police officer drive me to the domestic violence center because I didn't have a car. And then I had to tell my story over and over again. And this is why I am so for this organization and what they do. Because you see, you get one shot in helping someone. And had I come into the domestic violence center and had a cold shoulder and just desensitized because I deal with it all the time, there is an extremely high percentage I would have went back. But I was welcomed with open arms. I had an amazing caseworker by the name of Myra, who is absolutely amazing. She welcomed me with open arms. She told me it was going to be okay. And the warm embrace and the non-judgment from her is what gave me the courage to continue to move forward. After I got out of my situation, I'd love to tell you that I immediately started figuring things out, that I worked on myself, and that I'm here today. That's not what happened. I did exactly what a lot of us do when we've been through trauma. I stuffed it down in a little box, and I moved on about my life. I had 2 children to take care of, I had a full-time job, and I needed to rebuild my life at the age of 28. In doing so, what happened was those emotions continued to come back up. I was later diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and I was told that I was brainwashed. I can't tell you how many times I cried myself to sleep, how many times I cried on my way home just to wipe the tears away so that nobody had to see it, because I didn't have time to do it. And I bring this to you because all of us have done this. All of us have stuffed emotions down, have pretended that they don't exist, and gone on about our way. Have you ever lost yourself on your child, your spouse, in the car, and then realized later had nothing to do with them? That's called a trigger. It's an emotion that you haven't dealt with, that's been sitting there dormant, and when a similar situation comes up, it comes out, whether you want it to or not. And that is what prompted me 5 years ago to start my journey on healing myself. Because I needed to heal not only my own emotions and triggers, but I needed to be able to be a better mom. And I couldn't be a better mom unless I dealt with my own crap. And so that's what I did. And that's what I focus on today. 70% of Americans have been through some form of trauma. That could be domestic violence, childhood abuse, war, the loss of a loved one. We all have traumas. And within those traumas that we decide not to deal with, come those emotional triggers. If I can give you one thing to walk away with today, it's that you have the ability to decide how to deal with things. You just have to make space for it. You have the ability to choose how you want to deal with things and how you want to change your life. You just have to make the decision. And that was the decision that I made. I am now an entrepreneur. I am now the owner of the Lotus Effect, which is very close to my heart. Because you see, the lotus grows in the dirtiest of mud. Yet as it rises to the surface, it is absolutely beautiful and untainted. And that is what I feel like every single one of us have the ability to do and to be. And so I have a passion and a mission to not only share my story and bring that story to light, but to also share that every single one of us that have not dealt with our own traumas, we still have the ability to deal with them, regardless of your age, regardless of what you've been through. But you have to choose to step out of victimhood and step into empowerment, start owning what you've been through. You see, our stories are just a part of us, but they are not who we are. We all have the ability to redefine who it is we want to choose to be, not what other people have told us that we are. Had I listened to my ex, I would not be standing here in front of you. Had I believed that I was a monster, I would not be standing in front of you. Had I listened to everything inside of my head that I was a horrible mother, that I was a bad person, that my children didn't deserve me, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you. I made the decision that it was time to change. I decided to stop writing one book, and I chose to write a brand new one. And you all have the ability to do that as well. So I can't thank you all enough for being here today, for supporting this organization, for listening to me up here. If you'd love to learn more about my story and how I learned how to redefine my parenting with my children, and how stepping into a space of leadership and open communication changed the trajectory of how I now handle my teenagers today. They are 19 and 16. And how not only that made a difference in their lives and my family's lives, but how it also changed the way that I run my business. I have a co-author written book in the back. It's called Rattle the Weight. You can find the rest of that story there. And a portion of all of the proceeds will be going back to the Domestic Violence Center. I can't thank you all enough for being here, for giving me the space to share with you. And I hope that you choose to do one thing positive for someone each and every day in your lives and see the difference that it makes in yours.